How's it going, everyone? I'm Keegs, and now it's time for something completely random. And as I'm sure a lot of you watching this video know, NASA has recently decided Point Nemo will be where they are crashing the International Space Station in 2031. And Point Nemo is a place in the Pacific Ocean. It's like 2,000 miles away from the nearest human civilization. So it's actually where a lot of space tech goes to die. Not just from NASA, but everybody around the world. Russians use it and everything. So if you're looking for a crazy adventurous mission to get your hands on some authentic space tech, then Point Nemo is the place you should go to. The ISS is a low Earth orbit space station, or LEO. And what you might not know is NASA is decommissioning it in 2031, but they have no plans to replace it, or at least replace it themselves. Instead, they're going to be giving this technology to a private or multiple private companies so that they can maintain their own private space station. And NASA did say they will probably rent out a couple spaces for their own astronauts to sit aboard, but they themselves think they have completed most of the work they needed there, and they're setting their sights on further regions of space like the moon or even Mars. Within a couple years after the decommissioning, NASA said they're going to save something like $2 billion, which is crazy. And it's great because they will get to use that resource money to go to the further regions of space. But what I want to open it up to is a discussion now talking about whether or not you think it is the right idea to give this technology to private companies to sustain a station or not. I do want to preface this that I am not an astrophysicist or anything like that. I'm just a dude that's really fascinated by space exploration, and the physics of the universe. But because of this fascination that I have with space, I largely fall on the side of this being an actual good thing and a step in the right direction for the future of space travel. I have a few reasons that I think this, and I'm going to list them down below, and then I'm going to follow them up with some cons that I've heard other people's opinions about. So starting off, number one, this is a financially huge gain for NASA because, like they said, almost $2 billion annually they'll be saving. And I think they can save not only the money, but also the resources and the time and dedication of their physicists to explore different things instead of just maintaining old things that we've been doing for the last 20 years. Two, because they're letting a private company build another space station, they will now have an intermediate point between whatever further regions of space they're in and Earth. And if they were not to give this technology to a private company, one of two things would have happened. One, they couldn't have shut down the space station or would have had to build a new one themselves. Time and money, obviously. And two, if the other thing they could have done was just get rid of it entirely and have no space station and no intermediate support. So I think that is something that could help them in the future. And with the two astronauts that they will have stationed on that space station, there can be some faster relay communication times. Three, with a commercial company building parts for a space station, they will probably set up factories and production lines and create a lot of different space-related parts. And I'm sure NASA will have their own proprietary new parts for some of the more adventurous missions that they go on, but I think there will still be some parts that they can now essentially get off the shelf, which will speed up time and definitely money because more efficient and more production lines mean they're easier to produce. Four, the types of technologies that NASA develops on these really adventurous space missions does trickle back down usually to some sort of consumer advancement and technology advancement for the everyday person. I mean, things like figuring out how to grow plants in space and how the absorption of energy works and creating new and different means to sustain people in very hostile environments can trickle down to how to sustain people in not so hostile environments still. Five, I just think it's pretty cool to have people going into space more than just scientists. And I think it's a step in the right direction for mankind to go out into the further regions of space themselves many years into the future. I have heard other ideas as to why this is not a great idea and people don't think private companies should have their own space stations. And I'll list a few of them here. And if I have a counterpoint, I'll say my counterpoint to that too. The first one is that this is a giant waste of fuel and energy. And obviously, it's no surprise that getting someone into space takes a ton of fuel and an enormous amount of energy. And setting up something like a space hotel might create a lot of unnecessary pollution and waste in the process. The only thing I have to say about this really is that the more people that do it, gets cleaner inevitably and more efficient as they try to get more and more people up. But I agree, at the beginning, this probably will be a gas guzzler. One of the most prevalent cons I've heard is that this is just going to turn into an amusement park for the ultra rich to go play Space Cowboy. And I can't say that I really disagree with that point. In fact, I do agree with it. But there's a lot of technology that the rich get access to first before it trickles down to the rest of the population. One of the great examples of this is Tesla. When that came out, what was it, 10 years ago roughly, when you started seeing some here and there, it was really cool to see those cars drive by. And it was really for the ultra rich, because who's going to have a $150,000, $200,000 car that they drive around? Not too many people. But now it's trickled down, and it's not so amazing to see it anymore. It's kind of a dime a dozen thing. I'm not saying that space travel will come down to the normal person in the same amount of time that Tesla did. I think that's actually completely wrong. I think it's going to be many, many years. I mean, not my generation. I'll be dead before this happens, and possibly the generation under me will be dead before this happens. But I do think that this is a step in the right direction, because you have to start somewhere, and starting with people that can actually fund these things is, I think, the correct place to start. The last big con I've heard, and I also agree with, is are they in talks with another company to build a space station? It seems like a pretty big leap to just hope that another company is interested in spending billions of dollars to create a space station for some potential tourism and extra revenue. The upfront costs of this are just gigantic. So if they're not already in talks with someone, it's a pretty big hope that they're leaning on, because they need a space station, it still seems, because they want to rent space on it. But if somebody knows that they have a company, I'd love to hear down in the comments, because that would really interest me. Another thing that I don't think people think about is they only think the ultra rich can afford these space ventures. But the fact is, if a single person is backed by things like a university, they will probably be able to afford to go there, or another government for that matter. If, one of our partners in the EU wants to go up there, then all of a sudden they have their entire country backing them up, and they will be able to afford to go up there as well. They won't need some special agreement with the US government or anything crazy like that. They just go to that private company and say, hey, I want to buy some time on your space station, and then they can go up. So I think this is a great potential research opportunity for many academics that didn't previously have the merit to become an astronaut themselves, but now they'll be able to buy space time for themselves, and they can go up in the educational department. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion that I've had, and I'd like to know, which side do you fall on? Is this a good idea, or is this not a good idea? Let me know down in the comments. But I'm Keegs. Stay curious, my friends.